Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week we're going to talk about Tannoy speakers. Stick around. All right, so we're going to talk about Tannoy, but before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about the incredible past few weeks to a month that I've had. I have been extremely lucky. While I have quite a number of speakers that I have been planning and still planning to do a review of, I came across in three different scenarios an incredible group of speakers, and the Tannoy is one of them. I also have acquired a set of JBL Hartsfield, and it's a speaker that I never thought I would see, much less actually get to own for a period of time anyway. And then on top of that, a set of Jensen Imperial speakers. Now, they each have their own story. It wasn't like bam, bam, bam. The Jensens, for example, I've been talking to the owner for well over a year, and he was finally ready to make a deal, and it just sort of happened. So it was just a culmination of multiple events that over about a month time frame all aligned, and I just acquired just an incredible group of speakers in a short time frame. And so it's been a very exciting month, and it's been quite a busy month. So I thought I'd share that as I go over the next several weeks. I plan to do a review of each of those speakers. So if you are at all a fan of high-end collectible vintage speakers, you want to hit subscribe right now because you certainly don't want to miss them. The JBL Hartsfield, probably the most iconic JBL speaker ever made. It's what put JBL on the map. So if you don't want to miss that, hit subscribe. So let's talk about Tannoy though. I had some Tannoys many years ago, and I had what's called a Tannoy Granada, or at least it's a Tannoy Gold coaxial speaker in a Granada cabinet. So Tannoy started in the 1920s. I believe it started specifically in 1926, and the name comes from what is it? Tantalum alloy, I believe. So it was a combination of the two words to create Tannoy. And that company originally sort of claimed to fame was making public address systems. And they made those for many years, and all of their public address systems had their name plastered on the front of the speaker. Well, all the way through World War II, it was the speaker to be distributed in England. This was an English company, throughout England, and it would be a public address system. So, obviously, if you want to get messages out very quickly, you have a public address system. And so people would start to refer to it as the Tannoy. I heard the message on the Tannoy, and it became a way of describing sort of the system rather than seeing it as a separate company. In the same way that we, for a period of time anyway, said, give me a Xerox of this. Instead of saying copy, we would say a Xerox. And so it became a widely and well-known brand in England. And very well regarded as far as, I guess, their public address system. So in the 1960s, though, they released what is called the dual concentric speaker. And a dual concentric is essentially one point source, I believe, I always say, or source point speaker. And it's a dual concentric, which means there are two drivers within the same configuration. So there's the woofer here in the center behind this sort of screen is the tweeter. So you're getting all of the musical information from one source point. And so they became very well regarded in the 1960s. Now that was called the Tannoy Gold, and they're very collectible. I had a Tannoy Gold 10-inch driver inside of a Granada cabinet that I thought was one of the best looking speakers I've ever owned, actually. I'll show you some pictures of it. For me, it was, for just a basic rectangular speaker, I thought it was exceptionally nice looking. Unfortunately, I had to sell it because I was getting ready to move, and I just didn't have space for everything at the time. So I ended up selling it. It's one of the speakers I've always regretted selling. And I've not had any Tannoy since then, and that's been about 11 years now. So I ran across this set. This set is actually started its life in first ownership as in a corporate boardroom in Chicago, and for many years it sat in a corporate boardroom and probably got very minimal use because I'm sure the boardroom wasn't used that often. But eventually, several years ago, they decided it was time to remodel that boardroom, and everything in it was being thrown out. So one of the people that were responsible for removing everything realized that, hey, you know, these are fairly nice, and saved them, and actually didn't use them. And then I ran across them, and we made a deal. So so that's where they came from. Quite an interesting history for them. So this particular series, so the original dual concentric monitor, the Tannoy Gold, started in the 60s, 1967, and it was very popular through the 70s, and then they came out, I think, with the Tannoy Gold Red after that, which was the latter part of the 70s. This series started in, and this is from their professional line. This one started in the early 80s, I guess. This particular one, the Super Red Monitor, started around 1985. And so this is known as the M1000, and this is the Tannoy professional products. And then underneath this M1000, this one, there's a couple of versions of it, and this one is called the Sync Source. I don't think you can see it from all the way over there. You'll see it in the close-ups, but it's called the Sync Source model. And so a slight change, to, I think the other one was an M5 perhaps, but I couldn't really distinguish what was the biggest feature change between the two. But this one was, they had quite a number of products in that professional series for, let's say, 1985. I believe this was the largest single driver cabinet and model. They also had something called the Dreadnought, which was an enormous speaker, about twice the size. If you go take one of these cabinets over to either side of it and combine them, it had three separate drivers inside that cabinet. Just a monstrosity of a system. I'm sure it took 3 people to carry the thing. And that was the next larger one. These retailed for about $3,600 in 1985. So not an inexpensive speaker by any means. So that's the Tannoy M1000. I'm going to give you some close-up shots now, let you see how good it looks up close, and then after that we'll come and talk about how it sounds. Now, as part of that, if you've watched the videos before, I always compare them to a reference speaker. In the past, for anything larger than a bookshelf, that was always an Advent. Going forward though, I've decided to use my Pioneer TZ9, which has been my highest rated speaker from my reviews. And so this will be my reference speaker going forward for any, I'll say, higher end, better quality speakers. The Advent was just, too much of a too low of a baseline to compare against, much, I would say, superior speakers. So going forward, this is my new baseline for, I'll say, higher end speakers. So stick around, check out the close-ups, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the sound. All right, pretty cool looking speakers. I think they have that that classic Tannoy look. You know, they're very distinctive. If you've seen a Tannoy, you certainly, I think most people want to run them without the grills. They're pretty plain with the grills on, but man, you know, you got all that beautiful veneer and just that distinctive single source point driver, the dual concentric, just makes them stand out. And when you see a Tannoy, you know it's a Tannoy from across the room, you know, for the most part. So quite a cool speaker. All right. Well, so if you haven't seen my videos before, when I do a review, I compare them in 5 different areas. One is style, and the style is not just how it looks, but also its configuration. You know, how easy or hard is it to accommodate into a room? Then the imaging and the soundstage, then the lows, the mids, and the highs. And so each section gets up to 20 points. So I compare those against a baseline speaker. And so in prior videos, my baseline for anything larger than a bookshelf was the Advent, the new large Advent speaker. And that's a great speaker, but it's obviously a mid-range, you know, mid-level type speaker. And so it was getting outclassed significantly when you get into, you know, price ranges of $4,000 for these speakers when they were new. These speakers set themselves apart much further away from the Advent. So in order to sort of level the playing field to make it a little more accommodating against higher end speakers, I decided now to use this TZ9 as my baseline for, you know, that upper level class of speaker. So this is my new baseline for that level, and that's what the Tannoys have been compared to. So some standard metrics here for these. So this is the TZ9, manufactured from 1990 to 94. MSRP then was $4,000 a pair, has an impedance of 4 ohms, sensitivity of 91 decibels, and is a 3-way configuration. The Tannoy this is the Tannoy M1000 sync source. These were made around 1985. They retailed for $3,600 a pair. They are an 8 ohm speaker, has a 94 decibel rating, sensitivity, and this is a 15-inch dual concentric single point sound source. It's a mouthful. So that's the two speakers. So let's start off with style. Now, while I am a sucker for veneer, I love wood veneer. That's one of the things that I love about vintage gear, is that a lot of it, whether it's the gear itself, a lot of them had wood cabinets, or the speakers, you know, they had some fantastic and beautiful veneers. So that's one of the things that I love about them. But the other side of the equation is how easy or hard is it to accommodate into a room? Well, these are just a much wider speaker. They're about the same in weight, but it is a heck of a lot more challenging to move these things around due to their bulk than it is with these. And so for that reason, it ended up getting a lower score. These got a 12 versus a 14, you know, for the Pioneer. And it's simply for that reason of you just need a lot more floor real estate, you know, just to get them into a space. So they're just less accommodating. While these are still big, the footprint of this is much easier and you know, much less room real estate. And you know, so that's the difference in the scoring here. So 14 for the TZ9, 12 for the Super Red Monitor. So on to imaging and soundstage. So it was interesting. So both of them do an excellent job at imaging. These have been fantastic monitors in the industry for decades, and they were that, you know, successful for that because they're excellent speakers, and they do some very good job at imaging. So I found it kind of interesting when I was going back and forth. The imaging quality is excellent for both. What I found interesting for these, the one thing that differentiates them is the voice. When singers are singing, the singer is literally about where I'm standing in front of the music. So they're a little more forward, and it was interesting, you know, in that regard. Now, what I found a little bit different about the Pioneers is that a little more airiness to them than the monitors. So both of those features are very nice, but one can do this and the other one can't. So in essence, they ended up sort of canceling each other out on the points and getting the same score. So the TZ9 has an 18, and that is what I gave the Super Red Monitor as well, but for slightly different reasons. So ended up, getting the same score, but they have some different qualities about them, that made them a little bit different. On to lows. For the Tannoy, I put plentiful, liked some tracks more, but I liked some tracks, others on the TZ9. So it was sort of a back and forth battle. I would, play one track and getting an incredible amount of low end output on the Tannoys, and other tracks, I felt like they were putting out more than the TZ9s. And then I'd play a different track and I felt the opposite. So it was quite interesting. Both very pleasant. Loved them all. Loved both of them equally. Again, so it was quite interesting that they were a bit track specific sometimes. But in neither case did I ever say I wish I had more bass. They were putting out an incredible amount of bass on either one of them. So they ended up getting the 17, for each. That's the same score. Now on to the mids. Both are excellent. I ended up giving the slight edge to the Tannoy though, because of that on voices and singers, the singer being a little bit more forward, I found it to be a little more pleasant. And so, for that reason alone, I ended up giving the Tannoy the edge here. And so it gets another point. Well, I love the mid here for the Pioneer. That bit of differentiation, I think, deserved a point difference. So I ended up giving these an 18, whereas the Pioneers have a 17. Now on to the highs. I couldn't pick a winner. They are both excellent. But the one thing I did want to point out with the Tannoy, having had the earlier gold Tannoy from the 60s, the one thing, well, I love that speaker. When it came to jazz and things like that, they were awesome, but they were a bit rolled off on the top. And so for that reason, that was a bit of a weakness I felt of that speaker. Given the right music, they were incredible. These didn't suffer that. Whatever the issue, between the technology improvements, from the 60s to the 80s was pretty significant, which is pretty well known. I mean, I've talked about that in a lot of other speakers earlier. Early 60s, 50s speakers, the technology for the tweeter from that era, they couldn't, really get up there. They've addressed that. They addressed that. It's probably with the Reds as well. I've not heard a Tannoy Red, but I can tell you that these are absolutely not rolled off. They have plenty of crispness. They're an excellent sound. I just didn't find it to be, an improvement over the tweeter here for the Pioneer. So again, for that reason, I gave them the same score of an 18. So total everything up, the Pioneers, came in. They were already at an 84. Totaling up, the Super Red Monitor came in at an 83. The difference being primarily the form factor. These are just bigger and bulkier, so it suffered a couple of points there. But if you remove that review part of it and just look at the sound, it actually edged out the Pioneer by a point in that comparison. So, I think anyone would be pretty happy with either one of these in a very big way. They do, any music excellently. If you've got a space limitation, something to think about. This is a large speaker, takes a lot of room. And by the way, if you're going to get them through a door, you have to tilt them this way. You certainly couldn't do that this way. They're just, a little harder to accommodate. Now they weigh about the same again, but just a little more challenging to move around. Other thing to consider if you are, these are much more common. As far as finding any Tannoys, you're going to find this series, they've just made a lot more of them. These are much more rare. The drivers are unobtainium, right? If you were to break one of these drivers, they broke, in some reason, you can't find replacements and you can't get these fixed. You might be able to get the woofer fixed, but you're certainly not going to get, you know, these drivers. They're made of some rather exotic materials, and they don't make them anymore. So, so that's an issue for these. You can get these repaired. There's probably several places around the country to have any of these drivers fixed. So something else to think about. You know, I don't give points difference for that, but it is something to consider if you were to, you know, have these two speakers. Probably not ever going to find these, you know, honestly, to buy them as something you might seek out. But if, you know, something to think about if you had these or something else, you know, that you're considering. So that's pretty much it for the review this week. Had a great time, had a fantastic time, have a lot more fun coming. If you don't want to miss the upcoming reviews, the JBL Hartsfield, you know, I can't say enough words about how iconic that speaker. It is what created JBL, and it is the speaker that put them on the map. Without that speaker, there probably wouldn't be a JBL like we know it. So looking so much forward to doing that review. I will do them differently, by the way. These are 1950s speakers. They have a different, you know, sound quality to them. Technology was quite different back then. So I'm still thinking about how I want to review the JBL and the Jensens. Probably just put them head to head, I think. Probably is the most logical thing to do. I'm still thinking through that. But if you don't want to miss those, hit subscribe, you know, right now. Those are going to be some incredible reviews, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So hit that thumbs up as well. That'd be great. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you soon.